Well, welcome back once again to the Munn Avenue Muse podcast, videocast brought to you by the MunnAvenuePress.com. And I'm so thrilled today to welcome an author and friend with an amazing background and story. Her name is Dr. Stephanie J. Wong, PhD, and she is an Asian American licensed clinical psychologist, entrepreneur, BTS Army, and founder and host of the award-winning Color of Success podcast, which seeks to destigmatize mental health among Asian Americans and ethnic minorities. She works in private practice with tech professionals, most of which are ethnic minorities, and at a hospital serving military veterans. Dr. Wong was recently lauded as one of Asian Hustle Network's 50 Unsung Heroes. Her training in clinical interviewing has led to fireside chats with diverse podcast guests and several of our authors, too, about advancing their careers and addressing mental health and cultural identity. Notable guests have included celebrities Margaret Cho. Do you mind pronouncing that
Yes,
right?
Margaret Cho.
Margaret Cho, stars of Bling Empire, Andrew Fung of Kim's Convenience, content creator Jessica Wu, the cast of Netflix Partner Track, and more. Dr. Wong is a keynote speaker in academic, entertainment, and corporate settings, sharing her expertise in Asian American mental health, diversity, equity, and inclusion, working with underrepresented populations and empowering women of color. She also discusses the treatment of anxiety, depression, substance use, work-related stress, and relationship and cultural concerns. So, welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. You can cut any of that bio out. That needs to be done, Chris. But that was such a warm welcome, Charlie. And I'm so excited to be here as one of your first few cohort of guests on, Munn Avenue Muse. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's a delight to have you. And when I reread for the umpteenth time your bio, it's just so impressive that I don't know how you do it all, but I'm going to ask you about that a little later on. But you have a really interesting background as a psychologist on your professional life, your day job side of things. Can you talk a little bit about what you do there and what that entails?
Absolutely. Well, I do talk about this in multiple interviews in the book, Cancel the Filter. But one of the things that really inspired me was I went to a high school with pretty much the majority were AAPI identifying individuals. And one of the students during the time that I was going there, unfortunately, we lost him to suicide. And it had a huge impact because there were no mental health resources really offered at that time, or even I wasn't aware of it, but it was kind of like business as usual, still achieve, still everyone was expected to go to college. And, I don't have the hard numbers, but, it was a magnet school and, most of the students did go to college. And that was the main focus, was achieve. And my question was, well, what about the mental health? Because it was very stressful. And in fact, in college, I found it to be easier than high school, believe it or not. So I signed up for psychology, knowing this in the back of my mind, like, can I be kind of a bridge between my community and mental health? I couldn't verbalize that right at 18, but I was fortunate to like my pre-declared major and go on with it. And the struggle of getting into a PhD program directly from college was very, very difficult. But that just started my path of like, how can I help my community and also myself? It's like a huge learning experience about what do I bring to my life that may be challenges, barriers, or strengths.
Yeah, and in the environment you work in, I know at least some of the time you're working with veterans, right? That have their own set of problems, and layer that on top of being people of color as well. So there's there's a lot to sort through here. Do you feel like, I mean, I'm sure there's both positives and negatives to what you do. Do you feel like you're able to help, like you get some satisfaction in helping people progress through some of these challenges?
I think it is really, really difficult. It's a complicated question because it is, and I will put a disclaimer out. These are my personal opinions, nothing to do with the government. But I think what's really challenging is that there's the level of acuity that I work with in my day job can be really taxing. The and part is what I've seen is that people actually do change. When you see someone leading a meaningful life after maybe being in the legal system for 20 plus years or chronic homelessness, and you see them getting their first place or starting on an educational journey that they've always wanted to do, those are the meaningful experiences. But with any organization, it really takes a team. And my team is one of those rarities that we've stuck together over a decade plus. And that is so key to feeling supported and working with the population and the level of acuity that we go through, because we're really tasked with finding veterans jobs.
Ah,
And because we're a vocational rehabilitation program. But if you think about the spectrum of mental health, you and I get so much meaning out of having a job, having jobs. And it does give you meaning to wake up in the morning and interact with people. And you learn to be responsible, accountable, and obviously the income to pay your bills and things like that. But
sure.
people come out of these very difficult experiences. I mean, if you've lived on the streets for a long time, when do you pay the bills? Like, you have to help. It's not just finding a job, right? It's that psychosocial assistance that people need, those life skills. And I can't stress enough, like, how much my team helps with that. They operate like social workers, even though they're vocational rehabilitation specialists.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even realize that. I just learned something new about you. Tell me about what inspired you to write Cancel the Filter: Realities of a Psychologist, Podcaster, and a Working Mother of Color.
I mean, where do I even begin, Charlie? And you know the story already because you've, read it ad nauseum. But I think one of the huge things is I didn't want to make it this psychobabble kind of a book. A lot of people ask me, and it's in the book, how do you do it all? And I say, I'm 20 seconds from losing my shit all the time. And, we talk about that. I'm half kidding. And it's reality because how does anyone do it in this day and age, right? And being a mother is kind of it is my number one priority. And I will say that also showing my daughters that women can have a career and do the things that they love to do while continuing to build generational wealth is really, really pretty. I mean, it's my life's meaning at this point is, my family. It is the North Star. Like, how can we continue to give experiences that will make life meaningful? Because at the end of the day, no one sits on their lies on their deathbed and says, I should have worked more.
Right.
It's, I talk about this. Priscilla Esqueta is and was one of the most influential people in my life. We lost her to multiple myeloma. And she said, you know what? I'm not ready to go. There's still so many things I'd like to do in my life, but I've given so much love and I've received so much love. And that to me encapsulates the meaning of life for me.
No, that's a wonderful way to think about it. Yeah, it's interesting in these discussions we've gotten into. Yeah, sure, we want to talk about books, but we've really, and I think it's more meaningful to talk about what's really important in life.
Hmm.
One of the things that I had come across and actually wrote into my first book, and it's kind of a simplification, but it builds on what you're saying, is what are the three keys to happiness? And this just resonated with me, and it was having something to do, which is your
Job.
job,
Yeah.
having something to look forward to, and having somebody to love, and which your mentor referred to as well. But and in your case, you have a very wide umbrella for those you love, because
Yeah.
you're giving to a whole community of people, and on your podcast, bringing the message to a much wider audience. So share with us about, okay, what made you say one day, oh, I want to do a podcast and I'm going to interview all these amazing people, and what's your goal there, and tell us how that came about.
I mean, first to circle back to the book, the goal was really to normalize the day-to-day life and of just the craziness of, you know, trying to harmonize all these things. I use harmony instead of balance because the BTS founder really talked about that we tend to say balance and we make work the culprit. But I think it could be very complementary in our life. The podcast really came out of, it's actually funny because my husband and I, and now my daughter, my oldest, it's extremely cheap. And so we love free things to the point now where my husband's like, not all free things are created equal. Like, I don't want that junk. I'm like, you're being like discriminatory against free things, but apparently that's happened. But anyways, Dr. Melvin Varghese did this amazing podcast, Selling the Couch. And in 2016, I had no idea how to run and start a private practice. I wish that back then we had a joint MBA, PhD clinical program, because business is such a huge part of life.
Right.
It's not only about if creating a business, it's about managing finances. How do you make your money work for you? Um, and that takes a lot of hard work. And I talk about this, that I came from a working class family. My father was a grocer, single income, working 14 hours a day. And it's like, really, how do we work effectively so that we're not, sacrificing maybe some of the time spent with family? It's, making decisions and having choice. But I took Dr. Varghese's, teachings and created my private practice. And so during the pandemic, when he offered a free master class, free, I took the class and he asked a question that really resonated with me. What do you have to share with the world? I was not thinking about starting a full-fledged podcast and like it turning into something that, I loved. It was like, okay, what message do I have? And it came full circle, right? Destigmatize mental health in our communities and talk about the struggles, talk about the ways that we continue to build our businesses, our brands, and our families given our struggles.
Yeah, yeah, and I've listened to many, and watched many episodes of the Color of Success podcast, which I highly recommend. And you've had amazing guests with real, real hard life experiences as well as great successes. share some very meaningful things. So, and it's out there. So that, I mean, one really nice thing too is all the episodes are available. So you can either go back and start from the beginning or cherry pick things that look interesting to you. It's in a way, it's a kind of publishing.
It is.
I hadn't really thought about that until I started this. The Munn Avenue Muse, because I've written 6 books myself, and there's a certain satisfaction that you get from writing and publishing, and I'm finding I'm getting a similar satisfaction with producing an interesting hour or less together with people like you and putting it out into the world and maybe impacting some people's lives. For us in this podcast, I'm interested in, I love books, clearly. I first thought of this for authors because I get questions all the time from authors about publishing and writing and editing and what works and what doesn't work. But I also thought of this for readers because a lot of readers really want to know the story behind the story. I'm always fascinated to know the story behind the story. And actually, many Hollywood movies are made about Hollywood and how movies are made, right? Because people are interested. And also the people that I've worked with at the Munn Avenue Press, like you, are amazing, fascinating people. I think it takes some extra special effort to write a book like you did with Cancel the Filter. It was a lot of work. And then and when you sent your initial manuscript to us and our editor gave you feedback, you went back to work and did more work on it. I talked in a prior episode about how when I was writing my first book, I met John Sanford, who's a best-selling author, and he said, after I finish my book, the first draft, I go through it maybe 15 to 20 times. And when I heard that the first time, I almost fell off my chair because I was struggling to finish the first draft. That seemed impossible. But as you know now, you really do land up going through it 15 to 20 times because you want it to be right. And once it's out there, it's out there. And you want it to be your expression in your case, and both your experiences and lessons learned, right? And things that might help other people. There was an incredible section in your book about some of the things you went through with court and dealing with the bureaucracy. And can you just talk a little bit about that?
My colleague really encapsulated this recently of institutional trauma. And I think that was part of it, meaning, I had someone who was threatening, who didn't really think about it because I would think about it in a lens of clinical issues, like, oh, this person has delusions, psychosis, and things. And then someone just said, you know what? This person's stalking you, cyber stalking you on your private practice and doing all these things and having subtext of threatening my family. And what I felt at the time was I really relied on my social support within a system and obviously outside. But I think what I took away from it is, how do we continue to support providers? I think a lot of people are afraid of becoming medical doctors, psychologists, mental health, because, there's an expectation that, well, this person is sick, you should just kind of take it, right? And I don't know, everyone and their mom is trying to sue people. It's not just providers, but I hear it, in various industries because everyone has a lawyer, which I hired one at my own expense. And I'm like, I don't know someone that has the money to do that because it ain't easy or cheap to have a lawyer on speed dial, right? Um, and again, I had to really look at ways to further set boundaries at work. And in the book, while I do disclose my story, I mentioned that I get that the byproduct is people may know more about me. The and part is, how is this going to help inform the way that I practice? And there is a level of guardedness now about the way that I approach clinical work. And so while it was one of the most horrible experiences in my life, I also took a lot away from it. And I really try to advocate for other providers when they're dealing with these things, because unfortunately, it's very common. It's not really talked about. And I really try to say, hey, how can we protect a provider and provide high quality care? Anyone who works, what I've learned is that even in private practice, anyone who works in a big system, there's drama, there's, paperwork, there's who can I trust? It's a political game unless you kind of work for yourself in isolation, right? If I were just working with patients by myself, that I can decide who I'm serving and things like that. And for good and bad, and everything in between. And so, I work with a lot of people in tech in private practice, same thing, you know, and so many layoffs are happening. And fortunately, in the government, there's a sense of security.
Right.
It's really informed me moving forward in my career.
Yeah. Interesting. So, your podcast and your book speaks in large part to people of color, right?
Hmm.
And that's your experience. And people of color is a big umbrella, right? Because yes, it's
Hmm.
Asian American, it's African Americans, many other people.
Hmm.
How has that affected the way you deal with society and your job and your challenges? What's special or different about that?
Yeah, I like that you use special because I think it could also be a superpower in that you have a level of understanding of lived experience of maybe the challenges that happen. And I think one thing that really tipped Eleanor, like I said, to publish with you was that idea of you understand your privilege as a white male. You have mixed race grandchildren, which has given you a different perspective and the challenges that, we face. And for me, it's very important to also be aware of my stimulus value. Like I can say something very it'll be received very differently than say my coworker who's black, right? And so balancing that out and helping each other elevate our voices, but it's sad too because we have to do that. We have to play this chess game, and it's not always received in the best way because of how we look. Um, I obviously started my career pretty young, and so even someone saying like, "You're a doctor? You don't look like a doctor." And now I'm just like, yeah, bring it on. Like I'm getting older. Like, like that's a great compliment. But I think those are the challenges that are being faced. And then the other part outside is how people view different groups of people. We're facing a lot of stigma, stereotypes, discrimination, and we're still having this conversation of does that exist? And so I spend a lot of my time outside my day jobs giving speeches, doing workshops, to let people know that intersectionality really does play a part in mental health. Some people start out with the deck stacked against them. They grew up in poverty. They, had to face violence and maybe and obviously still do for many folks. And so really understanding that level of stress that people come to the office with, not just in therapy, but your coworkers. Like wondering how that is to really be the only XYZ. It can be isolating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that that term intersectionality is a newish term
Mhm.
to me and maybe to some people listening there. Can you define that for us?
Absolutely. Well, it really looks at people being and identifying with multiple underrepresented groups that have faced a lot of difficulties and don't have like equal access to resources, that equity and equality maybe historically and currently is not there. So for example, I identify as an Asian American woman, and given my age, there and education, there's a level of privilege that goes with that, that doesn't negate the idea that being a woman of an Asian American doesn't bring its own challenges. So, not to mention, we're talking about, gender identification, sexual orientation, you name it. People face what I call isms, racism, sexism, ableism. So those bring its own challenges.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the isms. There's a lot of isms around these days,
Yes.
and it's funny what you mentioned in effect being subject to ageism. I'm on the other end of that.
No, yeah. And I recognize that privilege, right? Is like
Yes,
people, as people age in our society,
right,
if you were to like go on the job market, people do discriminate against,
right.
this idea or this concept of, you know, maybe elder folks. And my mom is like, she's has so much more energy than me. She's always had more energy than me. And so just that ability to see the strength in people is so important.
Sure. And when I was in my 30s, I was running a business. We had 250 employees. And one of my proudest hire was I hired a 72-year-old for sales. And he was great.
Mhm.
Um, the only the only issue we had was he was sort of deaf. But so what he when he worked with somebody, he would not hear their objections. He'd only hear.
That could be a strength. That
Yes, it
could be
was
a
a
strength.
strength because they'd say, I'm not interested. And he'd say, well, okay, then I'll be at your house on Monday. Yeah, it can work that way too. The um, and yeah, I mean, you and I have an interesting relationship in how we got
Yes.
together because um, I mean, we first talked, and in so many ways we're different, but then in important ways we share our values.
Yes.
And as you did mention, yeah, my grandchildren are mixed race, which has taught me a lot and made me think a lot about it. And then also, it seems like the isms go through phases. So during the COVID
Yeah.
wave, anti-Asian sentiment, especially stoked by politicians who blamed
Mhm.
the flu on China, um, ticked up. And now with our current situation, I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
Anti-Semitism is rampant. It's You're right. The fact that anyone could say, "Oh, that's a thing of the past." It's really not. It's really not
It's
a
not.
thing of the past.
No, it's not.
So tell me about. We had so much fun working together on
Yes.
publishing your book. Share a little bit of that, what that experience was like for you.
Well, I have to say, I was considering submitting to a traditional publisher and they wouldn't they wanted me to change the language of 20 seconds from losing my shit, you know? And so I was introduced to you by another ghostwriter that reached out to me, and I ended up not using a ghostwriter because I wanted to be really in my own voice. But you know, when I met with you, what's great is that you're not a hard salesperson. You're like, okay, this is what I have to offer, and making our own decision. But I talk about this. So you and I recorded an episode for my show, and you were a little hesitant. You're like, well, I'm a white male, so I don't know how I fit into this. But I said, you know what? You have such interesting experiences. You've, you know, been through cycles of careers. The other part is you literally put it out when we first met. You might ask, you know, what a white person would really know about Asian American experience. And, you know, but this is what I have to offer. This is, you know, and you told me about your grandkids. And what I took away from that is you acknowledged your privilege. You use your privilege for good. And I think that self-awareness is just so important in terms of what we bring to the table, which ultimately, right, led Eleanor to be like, okay, this guy gets it. You could just have that feeling of like, this white guy gets it. So it's been absolutely amazing because, you know, it could be a very isolating process, but you're so, you know, experienced with helping. You have a team with editing, with like collaborating with the covers, and really walking you through the whole process. And I mean, it's just been a joy. And I think more meaningful is like the relationship that we've built throughout the process and becoming friends.
Yeah, yeah, no, I cherish that. And Lily, who works with us and worked with you, said to me some months ago, and I think it kind of captures what we look for. She said, you know what we do? We really help people fulfill their dreams. And writing a book and publishing a book is a dream. It's like a lifetime goal for many people. And to be able to help start from a raw manuscript and
Yes.
make everything look good and get it out on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and bookstores, and it's just very satisfying. And every time we publish a book, and lately we've been publishing about one a week, it feels like my own books are coming out. I get so excited about it. And I felt that way about Cancel the Filter, which is a wonderful book, and it is available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. If your local bookstore doesn't have one, they can order it. And one of my authors did something very clever recently. He's of Indian extraction, and he has a big family. And he sent them all to different libraries to request his book, that we published for him. And libraries are very accommodating, and they didn't have the book, but they all ordered the book. So, I mean, there was a way to get yourself into libraries. So a lot of it comes to creativity for our on the part of our authors too. I mean, we do things to help sell and promote books, but you have a podcast, you have an audience. Some people may wonder, well, how do I get the word out, right? So we help with that too, but you know, we have authors that are active on social media or do different things. And because I think one goal that all our authors have, most of them aren't in it for the money. You know, they're not going to make a living off the book. It's very hard to do that, although it is possible. But it's to be read. It's to have people get your message, right? And the more people that can read and enjoy your book, and there are books that have changed my life, you know, just like your mentors. Well, books can, if you're really a reader, can change your view of the world,
Yes.
actually inspire you to do different things. It can be really great that way. So yes, I'm going back to the question that I referenced at the very beginning, which is you're a wife, you're a mother, you're a psychologist, you're a podcaster, you're an author now. How in the world do you do it all? I mean, you are 20 seconds from losing your shit, but
Yeah.
how do you stay 20 seconds from losing your shit?
Sometimes I have to hide in my room with an ice cream bar. Now, but I will say that I just don't do it alone. I mentioned to you that my husband and I have been together since high school, and you've been similarly married for a very long time. And I think that really comes down to, can you find someone who will support your dreams? And we're very different. He is not a type A personality, and just so helpful. And he won't label himself a feminist, but because he lives with all women, he supports um, our efforts. He cooks dinners, he does the laundry and things like that. And so while those seem to be like household stereotypically female kinds of things, we want to teach our daughters that, obviously you need to know how to do that, especially if college is a thing by the time they go. But you can do other things as well. Don't be stuck in a box. And I think part of it is, now that you mentioned that, I have never played within the lines of a box. I never thought, psychologists weren't trained to be business people, or now in media. And in fact, everyone has different opinions. I mean, everyone has an opinion. And so that's the thing too, with books, with life. It's not for everyone the way that we operate. We have a truth that we live with. And so, sometimes people will read the books that we write, and it's not for them. But we do our best to tell a story, that our stories, and integrate, what we've been through, and communicate a message. But back to how I do it, I would answer, I don't. I harmonize. I continue to work to harmony. There's so many things that kind of go on, and sometimes I'm just like, oops, I forgot to do that. Sorry. But I have people in my life who remind me, hey, I'm going to bump this back up to you, because they know I'm very responsive. You and I work on the same wavelength. Like, let's get this done right away. Let's be responsive. And if I don't, then there's probably something else kind of going on, and just seeking empathy and understanding. But I surround myself with genuine, positive, supportive people. And I think that's what the podcast has been for me. It's not, I don't make a living off of that. In fact, like, I pay for most of it out of my own pocket, but I'm so proud of the connections that I've made with people, and the mini team that we've built, to really, like you said, publish an episode is a lot of work.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And it takes a lot of people, and talented people, to really continue to promote. And I didn't have the energy to continue. And so one of my friends was like, outsource for people to do the things that you don't necessarily like to do. I love to do the interviews, but I don't like to do, after doing it myself for so long, I was like, I don't want to do the editing. I don't want to do this.
No, it's enough to do what you do.
Yeah.
And
ask for help.
and at the same time, now you tell me whether you agree with this or not, and I'm going to confess to a prejudice that I have. My confession is that I think women are more capable of doing more than men are.
And that's why I love you.
And, I had thought about this the other day, that other than Chris, who produces these podcasts for us, who's very talented, we have 15 people working for the Munn Avenue Press, and 13 of them are women. and because women get shit done.
Ain't that the truth?
Now I'm sorry for my fellow males out there, but it's true. So, um,
I love that.
yeah, I mean, how do you do you agree with me, or do you think I'm really being sexist in making a remark like that?
I think I often think of a thought question, right? What if more women were in leadership positions? Where would we be at in the world? And using that thought question, I think, many times we come with lived experiences as being a minority and coming through with isms that, we come with, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but many come with empathy and like how to make people feel seen. And that multitasking that we were just referencing, like if you are a mother and a mompreneur and all those things, you have to have laser focus when you have that time.
Right,
Um,
right, yeah,
Not to mention, how do you build in self-care? There's a lot of moms that consider themselves stay at home, but I think that's the hardest job because you don't get paid. You don't get sick leave. You can't say, you know what, like I need to take a break. So I think either way, we get shit done. And I will definitely agree with that.
yeah. And I'm probably, and I say it half tongue in cheek because obviously, men do many great things. But my role model growing up was different than most because my father died when I was a year old. So my mother, who was a typical 50s housewife who stayed home and took care of the house and played cards and was forced because of the situation to go to work, and she became the first female stockbroker in New Jersey, and she was really good at it. And she balanced career, and she had three little kids. I was the youngest. Um, and so I looked to her as like, hey, this is a woman who, despite obstacles, and in the 50s, there were no women doing what she was doing, and makes it happen. Um, so that's where my prejudice comes from.
Well, I think it's part of your story and is a fantastic lens to view life from, right? And that's the other thing is like, who do you admire that is seemingly different from you? And maybe that will really be a good thought question for people because I think a good question that one of my friends posed was like, how many males have female mentors? Seek them out, try to get different experiences and strengths that they can bring to the table. And even understanding and leveraging your privilege so that women have more of a voice. And, I don't want to say, male, female, but non-binary, and it's just important to elevate diverse voices because that's what leads to progress. And your mom, oh my goodies, like amazing, amazing, not just a woman, but person, right? Like who can say that they would be able to handle that? And she did it.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, yeah. So, I was witness to that, and understood it. And at the same time, you learn from things like that. So, I mean, it would be better to have had a father.
Of
So
course.
I have two sons and three grandsons, and I decided because in those days there were father-son events that I couldn't attend, and that when I became a father, I was going to be really present. I coached the kids' baseball teams and basketball. I was working full time, but I was at every concert, every game. I showed up because I wanted to give them the experience that I missed. Um, and of course, when you give, you get. And it was so, clearly very gratifying for me. It's just unfortunate that they all live on the other side of the country, near you.
Yes.
But,
And I'm like, when Charlie's in town, I'm like the adopted child. We're like, we have to meet.
yeah, and we did. We had we met at some sleazy diner last time I was out there.
Like, where's Charlie taking me right now as I was driving up to it? But you know what? It was really cute, and it had really good pie. So
yeah, it did. It was very good. Well, Stephanie, it's been such a pleasure to spend a few moments with you and have you share some of your wisdom and experience. And I highly recommend Cancel the Filter to those out there who are readers. And if you are listeners, search for The Color of Success, and it'll come up on Spotify and Apple and YouTube and other major platforms. And of course, on those same platforms, you can search for Munn Avenue Muse, M-U-S-E, M-U-N-N for Munn, and that will come up on those platforms as well. And I would appreciate it if you like and subscribe, and of course share with friends so they can see more, hear more. And if you have a book in you that you would like to talk about, I'm happy to give a free consultation to any aspiring author. I want to support more people fulfilling those dreams too. So thank you so much for being on today.
thank you so much, Charlie, for having me.